Hello everyone and welcome to DC Central, and in today's video we're going to be going over, breaking down and reviewing The Flash Season 6 Episode 1, otherwise entitled Into the Void. And if you have not seen this episode, make sure you do so before proceeding with this review, as it will be filled with spoilers. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, The Flash is back after the hiatus. We are now officially returning with The Flash on our screens for Season 6, and I think this season honestly has a lot riding on it. There's a lot going into this season with the build-up to Crisis on Infinite Earths on the horizon, and with a new showrunner, Eric Wallace, taking the captain position of steering this ship. I think that Season 6 really has a lot of exciting things about it that is going to make it a very interesting season to talk about this year. But with all that out of the way, let's jump into the review. So the first thing I want to talk about is that Barry and Iris in this episode takes place around 4 months after Season 5. There was obviously news reports that this episode was going to take place like 4 seconds after the Season 5 premiere, and it does kick off there. But it doesn't really, we have one little scene right at the very beginning where Nora's message that was left by Nora that we saw at the end of Season 5, that gets destroyed, and then it cuts to 4 months later. But 4 months down the line, we still see Barry and Iris still heavily grieving Nora, but they're still not sure whether or not they should be grieving Nora, because they are of the belief that, well, while our version of Nora is gone, we'll see her again in years to come when, Barry and Iris do have a daughter in the future, and then we'll actually see Nora again. So they feel like they shouldn't be grieving Nora because they know that she'll come back, but then they don't know how to feel about that. And I thought that was actually interesting because typically, you'd see these kind of things where, oh, it's just simple, they're grieving, they're sad, blah, blah, blah. What I like about it is that they kind of were questioning themselves, especially Iris was really questioning whether or not she should almost be allowed to grieve, given the fact that, she knows one day she'll see Nora again. So I thought that was actually interesting, the fact that they had this kind of character moments where they were, almost disappointed in themselves or not sure whether or not they should be sad about Nora's death or disappearance. And I thought that was a nice touch. Now, Godspeed does show up in this episode. Obviously, we got Godspeed introduced last season in Nora's episode, and a lot of us have been waiting about Godspeed to see what they're going to do with him in the future. Now, Godspeed in this episode is more of a little bit of a tease. We see a little chase scene with Barry and Godspeed, which was really cool. We haven't seen Barry fight Godspeed before, so that was really cool. But he unmasks Godspeed, and he just makes this kind of verbal noise, and after that, he just kind of gets taken away. And Cisco actually says that this is the 4th Godspeed they've caught throughout the summer, so there must be some kind of thing going on here. So this is interesting. So all these Godspeeds that have been showing up throughout Central City are kind of connected in some way, and I think that this could be a tease for the actual Godspeed who we saw in the future, which is of course August Hart. That even Cisco says we haven't seen August Hart at all. I think this could be August Hart, doing something like he has these Godspeed clones or something like that. I don't know. He's got something going on, but I think this could be a tease for the back half of the season. We know that we're going to be getting a brand new villain post-Crisis, and I think that that villain could be Godspeed. I know a lot of people were thinking it was Red Death, but I've been thinking today, even before I saw this episode, that I think Godspeed is actually seeming like the likely candidate, and I feel like that this particular scene does set that up quite well. Now, one thing I've been very excited about going into this season is the idea of Iris actually doing journalism work and becoming a journalist. It's one thing they've teased for seasons upon seasons now, but they've never done it, and they've been promising that they were really going to do it this season. And with the new showrunner, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and we got hints of it here. We got the first actual little scenes with it. We actually got to see Iris chasing down leads, getting information from different places, bringing it all together to bring out a result. There was actual journalism work going on here from Iris, and it was so nice to see, because Candice Patton, you could see, has been dying to delve into this kind of story, and the fact that she's now being allowed to do it thanks to Eric Wallace, there's just so much going on that it sets up a lot. And we do see that obviously the Central City Citizen, which is her newspaper, is going to become a bigger part of this season. It's going to become a big thing, and I'm really excited to see how that develops. We know that Camilla, Cisco's girlfriend, is working for her as a photographer. I really feel like that this particular storyline with Iris being a journalist is really going to impact this season, and you can really see here, because it wasn't even like one scene or one line, it was actually multiple elements throughout the episode bringing together to actually show that Iris is doing journalism work, and I was so here for it. Now, the main storyline of this episode is that there are all these black holes popping in throughout Central City, and people wonder, well, what's going on? How do we stop this? Blah, blah, blah. So it turns out there's this online kind of live streamer who is called Chester, and he is essentially creating black holes. Now, this was okay. I mean, this was like, it wasn't a typical villain of the week thing. Like, normally with these premiere episodes, you normally just get a typical villain of the week kind of thing. This wasn't really that, like, because this character wasn't a villain. He just kind of had this connection to these black holes. I can't really explain the science of it because the show doesn't really do a good job of explaining it. Like, this episode had a lot of the typical thing that the Flash does, where it just kind of throws nonsensical science at the wall, expecting that you don't really listen to it. Because I was trying to focus on the dialogue, and I was trying to listen to it, and I did not have a clue what was going on. I mean, obviously, I'm not a man of science or a man of medical, but I did not understand a single word of what was going on in this episode in regards to the science side of it. But he was basically responsible for all these black holes, but in a non-intentional way. And this story was okay. It's all there just so we can have this end scene where Barry is going to take down this black hole, and Cisco uses Flash from Queen to play in the background, which was pretty funny. And it's really cool because obviously what happens earlier on in the episode is Iris goes to the junkyard to find Nora's old jacket that she used to wear when she was XS, and her jacket actually got lost in one of these black holes. So when Barry is inside the black hole to try and destroy it, he actually grabs Nora's jacket out of it on the way out, which I think was a really nice touch, and I'd put a little bow on that, which was really, really nice. But yeah, this black hole storyline, it was okay. It wasn't particularly well explained in my opinion, but it was okay. It was typical Flash science nonsense, but you know, it was entertaining enough, and we did get Flash running to Queen, so what more could you want, really? Now, we did get the introduction to the villain of the first half of this season, which was Dr. Ramsey Russo, aka Bloodwork. Now, I was very, very impressed with this character in the trailer. I really liked what they were doing with him. He seemed very intimidating. He seemed very, very driven. In this episode, I'm not fully like in love with him, but I think he's interesting as of right now. He has a connection to Caitlin. They went to medical school together. And essentially his mother passed away, and he is actually salty about that because he thinks that, because his mother, who was also a doctor, is that he believed that she could have fought it. And basically what Ramsey has is he has essentially a cure for cancer. He has a cure where if you infuse a human body with dark matter, that combined with white blood cells will actually kill the cancer within a person. So essentially, he has a cure to cancer. And what he wants is he wants Caitlin to help him with that because he needs to get the dark matter from Caitlin in Star Labs. But obviously, Caitlin doesn't want to do this because if you infuse someone with dark matter, they will become a metahuman. And, you know, if you don't do that without their permission, then that's kind of forcing them to become something that they might not want to become. So this is clearly where it's going to sort of go. And by the end of the episode, I believe it reveals that Ramsey himself has cancer, and he's injecting himself with this kind of with this serum, and that is what's causing him to become Bloodwork. Like, that is what's because we do see like the red arm start to form. So that's kind of like he's taking his own drug, essentially his own experimental drug, and as a result of that, he's becoming a metahuman and he's becoming Bloodwork. So that's how that's going to sort of work, if you without saying the word twice. So yeah, interesting enough. I liked him. I like the actor who's playing him. Randhill Ramamurthy, I think, or Sandhill Ramamurthy. But I definitely like what they're doing with Bloodwork, and I feel like with him just being, you know, the villain up until Crisis, I think is an interesting take. Also, I think what's interesting to see here as well is that we found out before the season started that him and Barry are going to have a personal connection, and I think that personal connection is going to be that they are both on a race against time to die, and I'll get back to that, but you know, I think that's cool. So I feel like having Ramsey as a personal villain with a connection to Caitlin and a connection to Barry, it just adds a lot more tension and a lot more of a personal connection between the characters, which is really good for a villain storyline. Now, speaking of Caitlin and Killer Frost, I liked what there's going on there because Killer Frost is essentially wanting a life. She's wanting to, you know, actually live her own life instead of just being, you know, just there for Caitlin, essentially. And this is actually an interesting storyline because Killer Frost has been through quite the arc since she was introduced, and I feel like this is a big next step, like, because I feel like this is saying that we're going to see a lot more Killer Frost this season than Caitlin, and we're going to see Killer Frost just, you know, in Star Labs and things like that, just hanging out with the team more than Caitlin. I think that's interesting because Killer Frost as a character is kind of just saved as kind of like a weapon, like a bomb. She only comes out when they need her to. So to actually have her as almost like a main character, I think could be interesting. And also I have to say that Killer Frost gets the absolute best line of this episode when she goes in and Ralph is trying to talk to her and she says, "Spare me the hallway talk." Brilliant line, brilliantly meta, brilliantly self-referential. I loved it, and I absolutely burst out laughing when I heard that line. So I do like what they're doing with Killer Frost this season overall. And speaking of Ralph, he doesn't show up in this episode until about halfway through. You find out he's chasing down a lead in Peru, or Morocco. They don't quite know. Now, this is basically just saying, that Ralph's been chasing down this lead for Sue Dearborn, who's of course Sue Dibney, who's going to be introduced this season. But Ralph, yeah, I mean, like I say, he doesn't really get that much to do in this episode. He's kind of just there to set up this storyline. So, you know, it just basically says that he's already chasing down this lead. It's kind of been 4 months since he's been chasing down this lead. So there's a lot of good stuff to come with this, and I feel like this could be a great storyline for Ralph too, which is something that he needs. He hasn't really had a good storyline since season 4. Now, the final scene of this episode is awesome. We see LaMonica Garrett show up as the Monitor in the Time Vault, and this is where he just drops the bomb and says to Barry directly to his face, "You're going to die on December the 10th, 2019, which coincidentally is the Flash episode, or the date of the Flash episode of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. So, this is really cool. We knew the Monitor was in this episode, and obviously, this season of The Flash, this season of Arrow, this season of Supergirl, probably Batwoman to a lesser extent, are all just going to be heavily building up to Crisis. It's going to be a huge thing. You know, this is basically the Arrowverse's version of Endgame. And the Monitor showing up here, basically just saying to Barry, you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to die to save, you know, to basically live through this crisis. I think is very, very exciting. And it does give us the date that he dies. And what's interesting about the date he dies is that, obviously, like I said, it's the Flash episode of the Crisis crossover, but more specifically, it's the last episode before the Christmas hiatus. So the way it's going to work is we're going to have the Flash episode, which is the 3rd episode of Crisis, and then we're going to have the Christmas break, and then it will come back with Arrow and Legends. So it basically seems like this is confirming a theory that a lot of people had, which is that Barry will die in this 3rd episode, and then that'll be the cliffhanger to keep us going up until the Arrow and Legends episodes return in January. So that's really cool that we get this confirmed, and I like the fact that he just told him to his face. We know the Monitor is not exactly the sentimental kind. You know, the Monitor isn't somebody who beats around the bush. He just exactly says it how it is, and I thought that was a really cool moment. And, you know, we always love it when LaMonica Garrett shows up because there's always something awesome to say. Overall, though, I thought this was a really great start for The Flash Season 6. I'm very optimistic about this season. I wouldn't have been unless Eric Wallace Hunter came in. Like, if this was still being showrun by Todd Helbing, I would still be a bit apprehensive about this season. But given the fact we have a new showrunner, that normally means that we're going to get a fresh, you know, breadth of life into the season. And I really felt that from this episode. We got a lot of really good ideas here. All the characters were really getting great individual storylines and also working together well. I like the villain. I like the Crisis teasers. I like the fact that they're floating Godspeed about there. I really feel like that this season is getting established really well in this episode, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they can pull it through. But I thought this was a great episode overall. So thank you guys for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like. It'll help me out a lot. And share this video with any other DC fans who you think may enjoy this content. And if you don't want to miss any Flash content just like this, or any other Arrowverse content for that matter, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, guys, I hope to see you all guys again in my next video.